You can't replace part of the brain. Like, you
treat them the same.
A source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the province.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the 90s, built $1 billion company that held up high, a lot of things.
State of MedTech with your host, Omar and Khateeb. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Now, while this is the state of medtech, we don't just limit it only to medtech. We're starting to do more biotech. And so I have a young founder who reached out and pitched her way onto the show. I love her story, and that's Andrea Stephany Diaz. Andrea is the founder and CEO of a company called OncoSwab, which essentially is a biotech company that's making at-home testing available for people who are at risk of lung cancer. The fact is that lung cancer is one of the leading causes of cancer death in the world, yet only 4 countries actually have a screening program, and not a lot of people get screened. And so this is a huge, huge thing. Even Steve Bell, who's as many of you know, big thought leader in the robotics space, right, even did a post about this as to why hasn't there been a company that figured out how to do in-home lung cancer screening. Well, Stephany and her team are doing that. So it's a super exciting episode where she talks about what it's like to be a young founder. I love what she does because she does what I call founder-led branding, where she actually has a YouTube channel that's very active, where she posts a lot of these videos talking about the biotech world, what it's like being a founder, and her company. So you check all that and more. And if you want to learn more about her company, OncoSwab, you can go to their website, which is OncoSwab.com. That's OncoSwab.com. Now, before we get on to our episode, I want to remind the audience, if you're a CEO or a founder of a startup, you just raised some money and you have 2 problems. Number one, fundraising never ends. So how do you stay in front of investors? But then more importantly, how do you get that traction to essentially get early adopters to adopt your product, but the ones who are not only going to use your product, but also open up a market, do thought leadership for you, maybe become a KOL. It's really difficult to do it, especially when you have a sales team. And even if you don't have a sales team, it's hard. Right. So that's why here at Khateeb & Co., we work with startups just like you, where we set up a commercial process that involves both digital marketing and outbound sales to find and cherry pick those early adopters. The best part is that through our process, aside from getting great marketing assets, product awareness, investor awareness out into the market through social media, you end up with a nice list of leads as well, so that when you hire that commercial team, you have some leads who may not have fit that early adopter profile, but may fit a later adopter profile that your sales team can go and reach out to. So if you want to learn more about that and how we help companies, go to khateebandco.com and book some time with me. So with that being said, let's get on to our episode with Stephany Andrea Diaz of OncoSwab. Enjoy. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. We have another episode where we're kind of diving more into the biotech space. This kind of happened last year as we started to expand the different topics we cover. And so I'm joined today by Andrea Stephany, who's the co-founder of OncoSwab, really interesting biotech company that's specifically focused on lung cancer. We've seen it at least in the robotics space, where you have Da Vinci, who else? Da Vinci, Oris, who's acquired by J&J, and of course Noah Medical, who are focused on the robotic approach of diagnosing lung lesions. And so it'll be interesting to kind of dive more into this and learn a little bit of the science. Now, I do want to let our listeners know that Andrea's company is still in stealth mode. And so we're not going to get into the details of how they do this or the efficacy, et cetera, but we're going to talk a little bit more about the science behind all this and more. So Andrea, thank you so much for joining the show.
Don't worry about it. It's a common mistake. Thank you so much for having me. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, you're going to definitely go on to do great things because you have 2 first names, like a first name, last name kind of going. So you're gonna do epic things. So
thank you.
Yeah, so maybe a little bit of background on you before we dive into the market and the science behind what you guys are doing. But yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so a little bit about myself. I was born in Venezuela, grew up in Spain, and I think that's a very important part of the introduction because, I moved to Spain when I was 12, and by the time I turned 23, I had lived in maybe 7 cities. So I've been moving around a lot from a very young age, and I definitely think that is, believe it or not, one of the reasons why I'm here today and I'm an entrepreneur because resilience, adaptability are just things that are natural to me because of these circumstances. So, well, yeah, that's why I included it in the introduction. I've always had a desire to impact people's lives in terms of health, patients' lives. That's what drove me to get my bachelor's in biochemistry in Barcelona, in Spain. And then I ended up doing a master's in molecular biotechnology, where I learned a lot about molecular detection, molecular diagnosis, and whatnot. And I tried the academia at first. Fun. It was fun. I really liked it. I have to say, though, that it felt a little slow and not so purpose driven, even though it might seem counterintuitive because it's all about driving science forward. However, I didn't see when we were actually going to make that big impact in patients' lives. And I was working on super interesting projects. Nanomedicine to treat stroke and sepsis in the early phases, and regenerate the vessels in the head after stroke. So definitely very interesting things. But every meeting we had with the consortium was about the next grant and the next paper. And then when I dared to ask, hey, so when are we going to be able to actually put this into practice with patients? They'd be like, oh, 15 years, 20, if at all. It's not like it wasn't on people's minds. And then I thought to myself, well, if I switch to the biotech industry, I'm sure this is something that's going to change because there is they're money driven because they need to make money. So maybe they do have a desire to impact patients' lives. So then I moved to Germany and started working at a biotech company. And I was doing really, really cool stuff. When it comes to scientifically, it was really cool. We were doing genetic engineering in iPSCs to look for different potential treatments of neurodegenerative diseases, including Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And sounds exciting, but it was really, really boring as well. Just because it seemed so. I was, let's say, bottom of the chain when I started at this biotech company, and I was literally 2 hands in a lab. And even though things were slow in the academia in that space, at least I felt like I could use my brain and my creativity, and if a problem arose, then I could think of a solution and just experiment a little. But in the biotech industry, that didn't happen. I just had to do whatever I was told, and I don't know, didn't really resonate with that. So I ended up leaving that job, and then that is also the beginning, obviously, of my startup. I was selected to participate in, let's call it, a sort of hackathon. This is a hackathon that the European Union organized for top 100 young scientists across the continent. And I had very high expectations when I joined this hackathon, because I had already determined that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, that I wanted to start a startup. In fact, something we can talk about later is that I had already attempted to start a couple of startups and, didn't really go anywhere. But I knew that because of how the hackathon was designed, this would be the perfect opportunity for me to find a mission. And then also because of the high level of, let's say, the bar to get into this program, I knew that I would also find very motivated, driven people and potentially a co-founder. And both of those things ended up happening. I ended up connecting with a mission that is now OncoSwab, and I met my now co-founder.
Yeah, no, I think that's a sentiment that a lot of people can share from at least the science world with regards to academia. Academia is great; it has its place, but sometimes it moves a little bit slower than we want. And then of course, there's a lot of politics that are involved with it, and especially if you're a young, talented, extremely ambitious person, we usually don't have time to wait around for academia. So that's fantastic. So how did the idea for OncoSwab come about? Of all the different areas for that you can kind of dive into from the science standpoint of biotech, why did it go into lung cancer?
Oh wow, that's a great question. Well, so let's go back to the hackathon and how it was designed. There were different, they called it mission arenas, and I signed up for the cancer mission arena, obviously because of my background. And there we had to identify problems, like challenges, societal challenges challenges within the cancer space that were not being solved currently. And while I had studied a lot of cancer back in college, like molecular biology and whatnot, biochemists don't really focus on necessarily the how it affects people, like society. We focus on the molecular aspect of it. So I really wasn't aware of how big of a problem lung cancer was. Meaning that while we were in this hackathon, fully immersed in the experience, we got connected to the fact that lung cancer kills more people than prostate, breast, and colon cancer combined, which is a crazy statistic that I was completely unaware of. And then we thought to ourselves, well, if it's such a deadly disease and it's the number one cancer killer in the world by far, I'm assuming that we're doing everything we can to detect it early, because we all know it's no secret that, in cancer, it's all about early detection. And the later we detect it, the lower the probabilities of survival are. And then that's when we learned that only a handful of countries have successfully implemented a screening program for lung cancer across the world. The US is one of those countries, but even in the US, around 4%, we don't really know the exact statistic, but it's definitely less than 10% of high-risk individuals get screened for lung cancer, which means that even the countries that have successfully implemented, we're still doing something wrong. So what we started to do is think, how can we first identify what the barriers are for high-risk individuals to get screened? And then, assuming that a lot of those barriers will be the common ones, the ones we know, we don't know which one is the leading one, but there are certain barriers like accessibility to imaging facilities, stigma, a lack of the process of being identified as a high-risk patient is very subjective still. It's related to how much a person smokes, and that can be highly, highly subjective, also linked to the stigma. So there are different factors there that we started to identify, and then said, okay, what other diseases have successfully managed to get people tested? And a lot of those diseases, what they have in common is that they've made it really, really, really easy for patients to get tested, just like decreasing the barriers altogether and just making it almost like a no-brainer for a patient to take care of their health. So we started thinking about that and said, okay, how can we make cancer detection as low, barrier-free, non-invasive, accessible, and low-cost, patient-friendly as possible? And that's when we came up with the concept of point-of-care lung cancer testing, point-of-care lung cancer detection, which is the premise that OncoSwab was born out of.
Got it. That makes a lot. That makes a lot of sense. And I think, one of the things that's interesting is that, at least in the biotech space, I feel like one of the more important things that biotech can do is to develop like these kind of ways of screening for things that honestly are not going to go away anytime soon. So like drinking is one of those things. Smoking is one of the other ones. Right now, like for a patient, like what's the current standard today? For patients.
So currently, a patient qualifies for lung cancer screening if they are between 50 and 80 years old and they have a pack history of 20 years, smoking pack history. This means smoking 1 pack a day for 20 years or smoking 2 packs a day for 10 years and along those lines. That is something that sounds like a lot, and you think that not that many people qualify because of the high standard, the high barrier. However, around 14.5 million Americans qualify under that criteria, which is surprising to many. But another interesting thing is that you might also think to yourself, why do we have to wait until a 20 pack year history? Why not? Because people do get diagnosed earlier. And actually, we are seeing that it depends on the ethnicity and demographic, but around half of the people with lung cancer would not have qualified for screening, which means that it's not necessarily a solid criteria that a lot of physicians you'll talk to, they don't necessarily agree with it. But the reason we have that high barrier is because our current technology is low-dose CT scan mostly for screening. Technically, it's CT scan, but for lung cancer screening, we do low-dose CT scan. And even though low dose, it's still obviously, as the name implies, a lower dose than the regular CT scan. It's still radiation. You're still being subject to radiation. And under the current guidelines that I just mentioned, 50 to 80 years old, that's 30 years of yearly scans, 30 years of yearly exposure to radiation, which is why currently the guidelines have been established for those at very, very high risk. However, when we think about the fact that those, let's say, narrow guidelines are thought to be that way because of the consequences of being constantly exposed to radiation, then something interesting that we think about, like us in the entrepreneurs in the healthcare space, is how can we build similar technologies that will allow us to detect presence of cancer, especially lung cancer, with a lower risk to the patient, so that we can expand potentially in one day the guidelines so that they can be similar to those of, for example, colorectal cancer screening, under which around 100 million Americans qualify for screening each year.
Yeah, and it's not done through imaging. And I think it's a good point. I mean, let's put the radiation issue aside for a second. I think the biggest thing is compliance, right? Because for patients to go and get screened, unless it's something urgent, like most people don't like to do it. And if it means that, like just to get a CT, I mean, I went through a CT scan myself recently. You have to go and get it scheduled. You have to go there. It's a really big hassle. And a lot of people don't have the time to do that sometimes. And so they'll put it off for a much longer time. And they're not going to put it off for like a week or two. A lot of times it'll be months, maybe even a year. And at that point, if they're at risk, the progression of any said cancer is going to be a lot worse, So would you say, in some ways, I feel like what you guys are doing is starting to get into the realm of predictive health, where in the sense that, you're using technology to get better about identifying, underlying pathologies earlier and sooner, and hopefully predicting the moment that these things can become a bigger issue. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, and I also think that is what makes companies like ours very exciting, because then the scalability of that goes beyond detection in the early phases. It goes beyond screening, and it really focuses on the longitudinal care of lung cancer and then potentially other types of cancer or other types of diseases. So that's really what makes us not just a screening company, but rather a diagnostic company. And back to the standard of care that you were talking about before, I completely agree. And we have to think that we're only thinking about the patient's side of things here, but we also need to consider the doctors, the physicians' side as well. And something that we've learned through our customer interviews or user interviews is that there's two big players that we're thinking about here when it comes to physicians. There's the primary care physician and there's a pulmonologist. So when we talk about primary care physicians, which will be the ones typically determining that a person has to undergo lung cancer screening, there is something called shared decision making. That once again, because the technology is still radiation, somewhat invasive, and again time consuming, just not very practical, there are certain risks that are associated to doing a yearly screening. And that is particularly the reason why this is technology, or this is a program that has been implemented in only a handful of countries in the world. So because there is this sort of risk versus reward that have to be analyzed, then the PCP, the primary care physician, has to take time out of its session, out of its consultation with the patient, to explain what the risks are, what the rewards are, and to see if it's going to be beneficial for that particular patient given their certain conditions. Because this is again highly subjective, and also, as you can imagine, time consuming, considering how little time the PCPs have with their patients, and they also have to think about blood pressure and diabetes and whatnot. We're really limiting the opportunity for PCPs to take their time and incentive, really, when being very honest, to go through this process. So more often than not, I'm talking to PCPs that say, you know what, to be honest, it's just, I don't do it unless there are clear symptoms. Unless it's a clearly high-risk patient, I don't even go through the shared decision-making process with my patients, which goes to show that it's definitely something that needs innovation there as well. We need to focus not just on the patient and how to make life easier for the patient, but also in my humble opinion, even most importantly, making the physician's life easier, because they will ultimately be the real users. Even if we have the best technology in the world and the most sensitive and accurate technology in the world that patients love, it's never going to be implemented if we're not really integrating to the existing clinical workflow.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's one of the more important things that when it comes to whether it's like medtech, biotech, any kind of medical technology that people have to take into account, which is medical care has become more complex. And of course, at least here in the United States, you've had a lot of consolidation of healthcare systems and everything. And so people are, expected to do as much, if not more, but with less time, and I think that when you come up with new technologies, the idea is like, how does this fit within an existing workflow and make things easier? Let me ask you this, is that, cancer screenings is like, it's a big market, huge market, multi-billion dollar market for big pharma and big biotech. Are there companies that are currently trying to look more into lung cancer screening? I can't imagine that there isn't. What does that look like? And again, I think the interesting thing about big biotech is that due to the risks involved and at least like the time to market and everything, they really rely on like startups to sort of develop these phase 1, phase 2 trials to, kick off the innovation, and then they usually fund and at some point hope, acquire. But right now, what's big biotech doing when it comes to like lung cancer screenings?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about lung cancer screening and companies focusing on that, my mind automatically goes to startups, as you very well said, not necessarily big pharma, big biotech. I think big biotech, what they really focus on is what comes after, which means the precision medicine aspect and the companion diagnostic and treatment and like the therapeutic aspect of it mostly. So I do think that there is a very interesting synergy between early stage companies or startups in general that are doing the early detection and then partnering up with the big pharmas and biotech, because it's mutually beneficial also for them to have access to these early stage patients that they can treat, right? So yeah, there's definitely competition in the cancer screening space, especially liquid biopsy is a very, trendy market right now. There are many companies doing liquid biopsy. Liquid biopsy means essentially blood samples, like a blood draw that certain biomarkers are detected. And there are many different ways to do it, different technologies. And, it's is somewhat growing, like definitely growing space, somewhat crowded even. I would say for lung cancer, it's not necessarily the most prevalent. I think a lot of companies are focusing on prostate, breast cancer. And then another big thing is multi-cancer detection tests. That's also a growing field, and we see the bigger companies like Grail and also Exact Sciences, the creator of Cologuard. They are focusing on blood tests, blood samples that can detect not just one type of cancer, but also multiple types of cancer. That is very promising. However, I must say that for lung cancer in particular, no blood draw test has really managed to be able to detect lung cancer in the earlier phases, at least in volumes of patients that are significant or that are high enough. So that's still definitely a challenge that most companies are battling with. I have to say we're not a liquid biopsy strictly company. Again, thank you for talking about the stealth mode still, but we don't focus on blood testing. So that is something that we're trying to turn that around, because we've seen that there are a lot of limitations to that.
Can you talk anything about how you guys do? I mean, and again, I know you're probably going to say no, but I have to ask. Because my audience sometimes they're like, oh, you should have pressed her a little bit more.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about how you do it? Can you tell us anything?
I would literally love to. I would really, really, really love to. Every inch of my body is urging.
No, it's okay. That's just a good reason to have you back on the show. But right now, like maybe tell us a little bit, like where are you guys in terms of your development and regulatory pathway? Like
Yes, that definitely we can talk about. So we are about to start a validation trial in Europe. So we have most of our R&D in Europe. So in terms of R&D, we're still in the validation phase, and then we're going to move to a, let's say, proof of concept trial for what's going to be our first product to market. So even though our big mission is screening, we are, as mentioned before, a diagnostic company, not just focusing on screening. We're focusing on the entire aspect of lung cancer care when it comes to detection, right? We're not a therapeutic company, we're a diagnostic company. So our first product to market is going to be in the nodule malignancy space and the nodule assessment. And that is something that we will be starting, if everything goes well, later this year, by the end of this year. And is definitely our faster way to market. In terms of regulatory, so I guess that answers the same question. And by the way, earlier you said that big pharmas and big companies depend on us startups to kind of move forward with this phase 1, phase 2 trial. And that's true, except that we, as diagnostic companies, we don't really go through the same regulatory pathway as therapeutic companies with the phase 1 and phase 2 trials. But it is definitely true that because it's really, really hard at the beginning to, just get the technology to work and manufacturing and that whole process. I do think that this would be, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and I'm glad you pointed that out. So because you guys don't have to go through that, your regulatory path to market is technically a lot shorter, and more importantly, a lot less expensive. Because I think that when you're a therapeutic. So again, this is important to point out, is that you guys are a diagnostic company, not a therapeutic company. Because if you were a therapeutic company, you would need like a lot of money, a lot of money. So like. Perfect example of that would be, I think, like Prometheus. They're focused on IBD and other disease like it. I think they exited for about 10.7 billion. They had raised $500 million total. But then, when they exit, just for them to move through their like phase 2 trial, I think like they're going to need like a lot of money, like by a lot of money, like maybe $1 billion, and so it made sense for them to move on to an exit with Merck versus in the case of a diagnostic company. Let me ask you this, because again, for my medtech audience, some of them are still new to biotech. You can self-fund a pathway to commercial, like a commercial pathway for as a diagnostic company, correct? Self-fund as in raise your own money and make it to market.
I mean, for sure, like with venture capital, you mean, without an acquisition.
That's
yes.
Yeah, not self-funded. Yeah, no.
I was like bootstrap. I was like, okay, maybe not.
I don't know if anything like that can even possibly exist unless you by bootstrapping. You're a founder who had like $1 billion exit and you're using your own money. Like maybe at that point.
Exactly.
But when through venture capital money, you don't need. Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah. It's very different from therapeutics in that regard.
Just out of curiosity, oh, go ahead. Sorry. No, it's okay. There's like a little delay.
I was going to say that. There's a little lag. Sorry about that. I was just going to say that the main difference with therapeutics is that the pathway is indefinitely shorter, and the amount of money needed is also less. Although there's a caveat to that. It depends. Grail, for example, raised around. Grail is an Illumina spin-off, and they do a blood test that can detect over 50 types of cancer. They raise around $1 billion. So the reason why
company though.
Yeah. What's that, sorry?
It's a great company though. But they raise a lot of money.
There is a lot of it. So it really depends on the strategy that the particular company has. And the reason why the expenses can get really high is because when you do screening trial, when you're talking about screening population, you're talking about in lung cancer, for example, the incidence of lung cancer within the high-risk population in the current screening, within the current screening guidelines, it's going to be around 0.5 to 2%. So if you need, a good amount of positive cases, you're going to have to test tens of thousands of patients with your technology in this trial to get the numbers you need. And that's what can get expenses, very high. But yes, sorry, you asked a question before.
Yeah. Oh, but I've departed since that.
Yeah.
Oh no, it was mainly that you guys are able to, as a diagnostic company, like it's not going to be as capital intensive as a therapeutic company. And the answer is
yeah. And then also the regulatory pathway is completely different. And another interesting thing that's what I was going to say before. You might think, or your audience might think, oh wow, diagnostics is the best. Like it's cheaper than therapeutics, it's faster than therapeutics. You can get to market with venture capital. Like why doesn't everybody do diagnostics? There's a catch to it, obviously. And the reason why diagnostics are really, really complicated and tough, there's actually two reasons why venture capitalists might not love diagnostics. One is getting to market might be easier than therapeutics, but getting reimbursed is really the big hurdle in diagnostics. Reimbursement is a huge problem, which is why I'm lucky enough to have advisors in my team that have done multiple diagnostic companies before, and they've been warning me since day one. So now we're starting to work with professionals in the space to help us understand what our reimbursement pathway, et cetera, will be, even though we're, still in the validation phase, but it's really important to understand that early on. Another thing is that, therapeutics takes longer. However, exit multiple is a lot higher. The risk versus reward in this case, it might be hit or miss, but if you hit it, the rewards are so high. Which with diagnostics, the exits we see might not be. I mean, some of them are great, but it doesn't have to be as blockbuster as therapeutics. And I think that's where venture capitalists see the difference.
Right. No, absolutely. Tell me, once you guys, you raise your money and you're feeling, what are some of the big goals? Like, I guess if all things go, when all things go, like, what are the big things that you want to make sure to accomplish, like mission wise?
Wow, that's a deep question. So it really depends on if we're talking about like midterm or long term. And so let me just answer both. I would say midterm, when it comes to, for example, this next round we'll be raising, it's definitely about conducting the next two trials that we have in place. This will be very, very important trials for this particular phase of our company, and definitely starting to get to market or getting closer to launching to market. With early adopters, just testing what the feedback is, what the community has to say. Those would be like midterm goals, but again, we're still not firsthand tackling screening yet for those first phases. We're just in the validation trial, etc. In the validation phase, sorry. Really what our mission with OncoSwab is to eliminate the barriers to lung cancer screening, and not just in the US, but worldwide. So something we haven't talked about is that I'm now in California, but we didn't start a company here. When we first started, I was in Germany. My co-founder was in the Netherlands, and we're now between Switzerland and the US because we're partially funded by the Swiss government, and we also have a company, like a subsidiary there. But before we did that, before we selected those two countries, so to say, we were exploring Europe because there are no screening programs in Europe. Germany is now taking an active approach to implementing a screening program. But the story I was going to share is that my mom is a long-term smoker, unfortunately for me. Like, I know. So it's ironic. But the point is that when I was doing this hackathon and I was learning all about lung cancer and how terrible it was and how hard it is to get detected and diagnosed, I started telling my mom, oh, listen, like you're technically high risk, which doesn't mean anything, right? Like it does mean a lot, but it doesn't mean, oh, you're high risk. You should be concerned right now and stop everything you're doing and get tested. I mean, that is what it should mean, but not in Spain where there is no screening program. So I didn't want to alarm her. But at the same time, I said, okay, listen, you need to get tested, but in Spain there's no such thing as, my mom is in Spain obviously, there's no such thing as a screening program. So how do we get you tested to make sure that you're like being compliant? And then my mom started going to the doctor and saying like, can I get tested for lung cancer? And they looked at her as if she was completely insane, out of her mind. Like, what do you mean? Do you have any symptoms? And she's like, no, I'm fine. They're like, okay, then why do you want to get tested? As if she's crazy, right? So then she called me and said that, and I said, okay, I think the only way is for us to lie. You need to go there and lie and say that you have symptoms. God forbid you're healthy forever, but just let's say that so you can get tested. And it's been, I think, maybe 15 months since that, like 16 months, and she still has not gotten tested. She goes to the doctor all the time and exaggerates her symptoms, exaggerates her coughs, exaggerates everything. And the doctor still provides no solution. They've tested it for a lot of different things, but never a CT scan, never for lung cancer. So I've always been hesitant to share this story because, I mean, my mom is, a healthy individual, and we don't want to play with, the odds. But it definitely showed me firsthand how people in other countries that don't have access to a screening program are really doomed to a late detection, and that's a terrible thing. So back to the long-term goal, this is my long-term goal, for this never to be a thing again. Because if we really, everything's successful and we really find a way to non-invasively take a patient sample, point of care, not even at a given hospital, and analyze and detect cancer presence through molecular detection, then this is already a signal that should be warning the physician to say, hey, you know what, actually, let's get you tested.
God, it makes a lot of sense. I want to go back to something that's super important. And again, what I appreciate is one of the reasons why you had reached out. I think you did listen to my podcast, and you know that for me, I'm very big on the art and science of finding and attracting early adopters, because an early adopter is going to be key to not only working with your company but also opening up a market and changing behavior. That's really what we're all in the business of, which is changing the behavior. Ideally for you, like, are you looking mainly for primary care physicians to adopt this? What would be the type of physician and setting? Because I'm wondering, just a follow on to that, like, is it possible for, like, well, go ahead and answer that question first, and I have a follow-on question to that.
Okay. I think it would be ideally pulmonologists. I think what we're seeing is that pulmonologists are the one. Remember, our first product to market is not screening tests. Screening tests is like years away, right? So our first product to market is what we call beachhead market, a niche application that we can start applying our technology to. And I would say for that, our ideal early adopters are pulmonologists that have a hard time classifying or identifying the malignancy of a lung nodule once identified either incidentally or through screening tests. So ideally pulmonologists, and then I'd love to hear from PCPs or just anybody in general that has to think about lung cancer screening and has a problem navigating that would be great people to talk to as well.
Got it. So my next follow-on question for you is just like, is it, once you guys are commercial, is it as easy as like a PCP or anybody that you just mentioned to essentially just directly order the tests themselves? And, like how easy is that? Because I think, in my opinion, the other problem with the current way that lung cancer is screened is that there's too many steps involved. Like, I go to the doctor's office, let's say I qualify for it. It's like, okay, well, you need to set up an appointment. Okay, well, I need to call. We first find the imaging center. Most of these companies and doctors, they have an imaging center just because they're part of our healthcare system. Then I have to call that imaging center. I have to book an appointment. I have to go there. There's like all these different steps that are involved. And I'm a young person, right? Keep in mind, the person who's getting screened for lung cancer is probably like well above the age of 50 most of the time, right? So what I'm wondering is, is it possible for a physician to just directly order this test, like within, like, patient comes and sees me, I'm a primary care doctor, I say, you're at high risk for this, I'm going to order this right now for you. It's going to just ship directly delivered to your home, and you're just going to do it there. Or even I have it there in the office.
Yeah. So those two options. Yeah.
How you could, but like just.
No, literally. What you just said, like, ideally the physician has it already there, has the kit already, and it's something that they can simply order. They can order the lab results essentially. So it's definitely something that can be done directly. Again, we're all about decreasing the barrier. So right now, when it comes to screening, as you just said, there are so many steps. There are so many follow-ons to do. And what doctors tell us is that the percentage of people that they lose between the moment they're identified as high risk and the moment the CT scan gets done is really high. So we're all about eliminating those barriers. So yeah, to answer your question, 100%, absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, look, I know we can't like dive into a lot of details, but I appreciate you coming on the show. Now I want to do like a little bit of shift and talk about a few things. First of all, you're the kind of founder that I really want to see more of, because, you're busy as a founder and everything, but you have an active YouTube channel. You got a great like LinkedIn presence. You put out content, So again, like, and your YouTube channel, I'm a big fan of the name. It's DN Andrea. So DNA. Yeah. So I love that. So how important is it for you? Like, if you can talk about it, like to, for other founders, because my whole part of my business is I help founders with this. But talk about, like, why is it important for you to have that kind of stuff up? Like, how has that helped you, as a founder?
I love that question because my YouTube channel has helped me in so many ways that I never, ever in a million years imagined it would. I started it, when I started it, COVID. I started my YouTube channel during COVID because I had always wanted to talk about science and explain science to the common audience, essentially, because I'm obsessed, fascinated by biotechnology and biology and how everything works since I started, honestly, since high school. And again, as you can see, I like talking. So I thought to myself, well, a YouTube channel makes perfect sense, but I was too scared, actually, of what people might say. And I wasn't necessarily the top of my class in college. So I thought, oh, my peers are going to laugh at me because I'm not the smartest. So what am I thinking here? These kind of things that you tell to yourself that don't make any sense. So COVID was a perfect moment to just go ahead and start recording videos and posting them online because I was not going to see anybody anyways. And then that evolved into, well, actually a business. So that was the first two companies I started, small solopreneur companies, were through the YouTube channel. One was an e-commerce brand that I really loved, kind of like cool swag, if you will, for scientists. So I thought, okay, why is the merch always so boring in science? It's always so nerdy. I want to make it cool. I want to make it trendy. So I started.
Can people order that merch?
Is that what? Sorry.
Can people still order that? Is that website still up? Can people still order merch? Oh, no, darn it!
Darn it, right? Darn it. I mean,
science merch sucks.
I mean, if somebody wants, I still have the back end of the website there. If anybody wants to run the business, like definitely hit me up. I have a lot of designs done already, and we did sell like a few $1,000s. It was going well, I guess, but it does take a lot of time to run a company like that. And you would think that it's so easy, and gurus on the internet make you think that it's so simple, but it really isn't. And I had a full-time job, and I had a YouTube. I had no time. And then when I started the startup, I was like, who am I lying to? So I shut that down. But if anybody wants to, take over, I'd love to partner up. And then the second company that started because of that was actually just me creating content for other companies that reached out to me, like the National Research Institute in Spain. I started a project with them. I also worked with a net tech company here in the US. Just a lot of companies that had a hard time going from complex science to simple science. So that's one thing. It helped me in that way. It helped me really train my ability to explain complex science in a way that's relatable and understanding. And also my first, steps into entrepreneurship, you could say, also allowed me to pay the bills, because that was my side hustle when I started the company. And the first year I didn't have a salary. So definitely very important for that. Another reason, like now, what your question was mostly directed to founders, right? So obviously, as you can see, my channel, I have around 35 videos or so, but I've had obviously less time to post videos, which is something incredibly time consuming in since I started the startup. But while I do think that I wish I had more time / prioritized it more, the fact that I had already an online presence, an internet presence, and I already had I think I have around 20,000 followers between YouTube and TikTok, is a way for people. Yeah, thank you. Especially considering the niche, right? Which is not, it's not makeup, right? So
you made some good videos. Like, for me, I've been in the content game for a long, long time right now. But yeah, I saw the science of Wim Hof method, the Iceman, truth or fiction, great one, because that's got already 128,000 views on it. You got some good viewership on it. It's really, it's super impressive.
Yeah, thank you. And I think something that's really, really valuable is that as a founder, you're trying to, especially in the early stage, it's all about you as a founder. The company is you. You are the company, right? So when you post content, and you know this as well, right? Both written on LinkedIn and also video in a video format, the content is working for you 24/7. You are not the one that's putting yourself out there. And it doesn't just rely on you being active physically live, but also it's a way for people to get to know you before they even know you. So I've had a lot of people, investors even, that I cold reach out to on LinkedIn. And then some will say, oh, I watched one of your videos. I love your personality. Or, oh, great video. Something about the videos that is already a huge icebreaker, because they feel like they're talking to you. They feel like they know you a little bit. And that is already a huge part of it, especially with new contacts. So I would highly, highly, highly recommend at least doing written form content on LinkedIn, just like having an online presence. It's a great way for people to get to know you and also for you to stay top of mind.
Absolutely. And again, this is the big thing that I tell people all the time is that, early on when you're a pre-seed, series A, B, and even sometimes C company, you're not a spreadsheet company, either you're not commercial or you are commercial. You don't have a lot of numbers behind you. You're really a PowerPoint company. And at that point, the reason why people are going to invest is based on the story, right? And, it's such a cliche thing. It's like, oh, the story. But part of it, I think, when it comes to persuasion, is you have to be able to get attention. And the number one way to get attention is to make sure it's you as the founder. I think too many times the founder or CEO wants to hire a marketing person or something and have it be on them. But in reality, if somebody's going to invest, part of the reason why they're investing is because of you, the founder. And so you have to find ways to put yourself out there with content to get attention, so that even when you go into a room to present, people are like, oh yeah, I've seen you, I've seen content of you. Like those kind of things help. And just as a small example of it, I've mentioned this many times on my show and people kind of give me a hard time about it, but it's a great example is, so Ann Ostwood, who's the CEO of Moon Surgical, which is a robotics company, they've raised, I think $80 or $90 million. Their Series B was led by NVIDIA. And in large part is because from day one, they've been, and of course I worked with them very, very early on, but they create content, they storytell to the market and everything, and that's what you have to do. I think too many times people are trying to limiting that storytelling to like, oh, when I have a meeting or when I'm presenting, it's just not enough, No,
definitely not. And then you also can't outsource authenticity, to your point, right? Like people want to hire a marketer, people want to hire this and that, and while I do think that helps, I mean, literally think, I don't know, because I've never done it, I could imagine it helps. Your content creation can, if it's outsourced, sure. If it's like a really, really good ghostwriter, which is also probably going to be expensive, but chances are that, especially at the beginning, it really has to be you telling the story. It really has to be you expressing your views and opinions. And I love the example you just shared, because another thing that shows is that you need to be in contact with all of these players and stay top of mind from the beginning. I think I've been talking to potential Series A investors since we literally had a PowerPoint, and that was it. We had nothing else, just a PowerPoint. And I still talk to them on a quarterly basis, and I send them out the emails, and we have catch-up meetings, just because it's important. Again, I think I'm very, very lucky to have really good advisors that have been, guiding me in this journey and give me these great tips. But I've learned that it's really important, because by the time we get to that stage, they will know us already. It's not a matter of getting to trust us. So that part will be hopefully done. And B, another important thing is that they will have seen how we executed over the years. And I think it's startups, it's all about execution.
100%. And just a side note, I hope you don't mind me saying, because I love stuff like this. Again, I love startups. I love the startup grind. I love what it's all about. So right now, you're at a co-working space.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love it. I don't know if you noticed, but I don't know what's behind you, but there's some dude who just came in. He was putting on a shirt and stuff. It was the best moment ever. I love it.
I know. I'm literally trying to hide it with my head.
That's what people they watch this show, because this is part of the gig. I mean, look, even me, and my studio's in my home. Sometimes you hear my kid in the background. I think one of my most downloaded episodes, it was when I wasn't good about clicking the mute button, and my kid was losing his mind in the background. So you can hear me asking a question, then you hear but no, it's just part. It's
part of it. And actually, it's even more part of the grind than you think, because I gave you the short answer, which is I'm at a co-working space. That's not even true. So I'm staying at a friend / one of our investors' house. She's hosting me here in California, and I literally travel all the time. I'm a nomad. Hopefully that will change soon. But this is sort of the residential area. So what I have behind me is a pool, and somebody's taking their morning swim, and I'm here using this whole thing as an office to record a podcast episode. So definitely super part of the grind.
No, not at all. Well, Andrea, look, we really appreciate you coming on the show. Definitely. Once you guys do your raise and you're a little bit more public and can share more, I'd love to have you back on the show to kind of talk more about the science and everything. But in the meantime, where can people find you? And usually, they have one thing, you have multiple. So where can people find you online and follow you?
I would definitely say LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I'm Andrea Stephany Diaz. That's 2 last names. Stephany is not my name. It's okay. People think of that, but it's fine. So Andrea Stephany Diaz, I think that's the best way to get connected. And if people are curious and want to check out my YouTube channel, it's, as you said, DNA Andrea with 1 A, D and Andrea.
Perfect. Fantastic. Andrea, thank you so much for joining on the show. For all the audience who is listening, please go and give her a follow on LinkedIn. Go check out your YouTube channel. And if you have more questions, please leave a comment in the comment section below. In Spotify and YouTube, we read all those comments and we post them. So that being said, this is another episode of the State of MedTech. We'll see you all next time.
Thank you for enjoying another epic episode of the State of MedTech. If you're feeling inspired and love this episode, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on so you never miss an episode. And be sure to give us 5 stars and write a short review because that helps more people discover this amazing community of ours. If you're a company who has a executive that you'd like to be on the show, or perhaps you want to sponsor one of the episodes, shoot us an email at hello@khateebandco.com. Take care, and we'll see you next time.